We'll take you to Ethiopia now. The Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed today summoned lawmakers for an extraordinary session of parliament amid the ongoing conflict in the Tigray region. Nearly a month of fighting between Ethiopian federal forces and Tigray regional ones has threatened to destabilize Ethiopia, the linchpin of the strategic Horn of Africa and its neighbors. The involvement of Eritrea in the conflict has been alleged by refugees and the now fugitive Tigray leaders, but like much in the seal-off region, has not been verified. Overnight, the U.S. Embassy in Eritrea said 6 explosions were heard in the capital, Asmara. It followed an embassy report of another loud noise, possibly an explosion on Friday, nearly 2 weeks after the Tigray regional leader confirmed that firing missiles at the city. The latest explosions came just hours after Abiy declared victory in his government's fighting against the Tigray People's Liberation Front, which has run the northern Tigray region. The army said it was in full control of territorial capital Mekelle, but the government said TPLF leaders remain on the run.
Meanwhile, Ethiopia's northern Tigray region has said that its forces have shot down a federal warplane and captured its pilot as fighting there enters its 4th week. But Ethiopia's Minister of Democratization, Zadric Abraha, noted that the reports that a plane was shot down were not true. A communications blackout in the region has made it difficult to access information on the conflict, with media outlets relying on official statements from the warring sides. The federal government announced on the 28th of November that its forces had captured the regional capital, Mekelle, after weeks of fighting. Thousands of people are believed to have died in the fighting, and at least 43,000 refugees have fled to neighboring Sudan.
Well, joining us to discuss the Ethiopian situation is FARAI MUVUTI, political analyst with the Southern African Times. FARAI, glad to have you join us on NEWDAY. All right.
Thank you for having me.
Good, fine. Let's start with what news, or well, let's even start with the extraordinary meeting that is being called by the Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed of the lawmakers. What do we expect from this meeting that he is calling?
The assertion, let me start by saying that the assertion here is that if we're to go with the government's report or the Federation's report, is that they have taken over Mekelle and major cities within the region, which translates to their plan, which initially was to take over the region, hence why they had called for a cessation or ceasefire on Wednesday, which of course failed. When they then attacked, their plan was to take over the region and then so to encourage the issue to end. As we had stated earlier in the last report we did, was that the two choices that the government was left with were to either negotiate or to go in heavy-handed. It appears that the option of going in heavy-handedly has, if we're to take their reports on its word, as a consequence of not having direct access to the region itself due to the shutdown of the internet and communication channels, then it appears that their plan has worked. Now, to answer your question as far as what the negotiation would be, I don't think there would be a negotiation. It's imperative to the government and the region itself that they take full control of the country. Hence why they have titled it a law and order sort of approach to dealing with the scourges. But what we may find is that the war has not really ended. It's merely transcended. It's not a conventional war as we would know it, where two forces have known territories to fight. What we may find is that the Tigrayan army may go towards a guerrilla tactic of war. So it will be a new insurgency. How they intend to contain that is yet to be seen.
FARAI, the leader of the TPLF, the Tigray People's Liberation Front, has come out to say that they are still fighting close to Mekelle as we speak. So it's all very worrying indeed, because one has to ask, this definitely hasn't come to an end, so where is this going? But FARAI, I wanted to ask you, just how large of a humanitarian crisis are we looking at here?
I think we're looking at a very large humanitarian crisis. I mean, from the reports that have just come out, we're looking at 43,000 people displaced. We're looking at probably a casualty number of in the thousands. We don't have a precise number yet, of course, as a consequence of not having access to comms in the region. But it looks like a very dire humanitarian crisis. But also to add to the point that you just made earlier, the Tigrayan army, it's very correct. The reports are suggesting that they're going to continue fighting. But what we do know is that the fighting mode, they've moved out of Mekelle, they've moved out of the major cities. Those have been taken over by the Federation, the Federation's army. What that simply means is that the war will not take a conventional method, so it will be more guerrilla tactics. So purely an insurgency is what's going to be brewing here. So one is yet to see how the government intends to deal with that. The government has an obligation to ensure that it maintains regional confidence and equally international confidence, considering that they came on the mantra of peace. So moving forward, containing this effectively, quickly. So far, if the promises, or rather the reports, are true coming from government that they've contained the situation within the region, then so far they're keeping their promises. So there can be a sense of optimism, but the question is, moving forward, will they be able to unite a very troubled coalition?
FARAI, I gather that the hospitals are struggling in Mekelle to take care of the wounded and that they have run out of medical supplies. What is the international community doing? How are they contributing to what is playing out in Tigray?
Well, if we're to go by the UN report so far, the UN, of course, has been asking for access to these very vulnerable areas. The government has assured that in time, once they've cleared the area, they will do so. So it's a question of timing, really. And also, of course, as you all know, that the government has been asking for no intrusion within its domestic affairs. The UN, of course, has suggested that this issue needs to be contained quite early. So far, the government does have the support of major cities, major governments. The US seems to be well nuanced with the issue, which is quite new if one is to look at the general perception of African affairs as it relates to war. So in as much as it is. It appears that the perception is understood, and the veracity of the issue and how it can, it has the potential to destabilize the region is equally a question that I think a lot of countries and governments are looking at. But so far, there seems to be a sense of patience as it concerns dealing with the government's current operation.
So in terms of the way forward, then, what exactly do we need to see being done here? How hopeful are you that peace is going to be restored in Ethiopia?
Well, I think the sign of that would be the opening up of communication. That would be a first stage to ensure that there is transparency towards the transitional process, because if they're going to change the government of Tigray, then that process has to be transparent. So that would be a first sign. Then secondly, it would be outlining what their plan is to deal with the insurgency thereof. If their thrust is to build regional confidence and international confidence, especially on the investment front, that has been a critical area for them from entry point in 2018, then it will be clearing the area, opening up comms, and being more transparent about what's actually going on in the region.
FARAI, any hope at all? I mean, we'll look back and remember the fact that not quite long ago, the Prime Minister, Abiy Ahmed, got the Nobel Prize for Peace for what he did with Eritrea. Any attempt, or can we possibly look at dialogue between Ethiopia and the Tigrayan leaders? Or are we past that?
Well, I think let me start off by the Nobel Peace Prize comment. You see, I think it's an international perceptive issue. If you think of it, when Obama got the Nobel Peace Prize, for instance, and went to war directly after that, this was not a question. It was judged to be a war being necessary when it comes to issues relating to national security. The perception should be the same in this context if we're to look at the history. Now, are we past negotiations? I think so. The government had no choice from our reading, the two options that were there was that if there was to be a negotiation, that negotiation would potentially lead to a petitioning of the country, which is something that the government did not want to put on the table at all. If one is to consider that all other 9 regions, if you look at Amara and the Omera region, which are quite contested and very heavily facing political challenges. When you look at the divide between the political elites within these regions, it would have created a ripple effect. So to avoid that, my suggestion would be that war in this context would have been necessary to contain the peace that the country has won so recently. So we are past negotiations. The government has played a heavy hand in response to the heavy-handedness that the Tigrayan region had approached the issue with. Moving forward, perhaps, what we might find is regional players getting involved in trying to find a settlement between the Tigrayan, but more so emphasizing on the Tigrayan part that if you are part of the coalition, then one must abide with the coalition's terms. If that is something that they're yet to accept, considering that they underwrote the constitution of the federation as it exists, it's yet to be seen. So one has to look at it from that background. You know, Tigrayans were in power for 30 years. They've lost power. How it's negotiated without the petitioning is very difficult to see. So it's going to be a challenge that the government has to face. But so far, they seem to have played their hand, and that hand the cards that they played so far playing into their advantage. It's now an international and regional perception issue.
Thanks, FARAI. We have just about a minute to go. Let me try and get this question out very quickly. Do you think African governments have done enough or are doing enough in terms of mediating? Nigeria's ex-president Olusegun Obasanjo went over to Ethiopia about 2 weeks ago. I believe South Africa also sent envoys over to Ethiopia. What's your take?
Well, I think they're the Ethiopian government was very clear from get-go that they want limited external influence on this particular issue. They do not see it as an international crisis. In fact, they argue that the Tigrayan government, the administration in the region, wanted to internationalize the war. But they see it as purely a law and order issue, and all they needed was time to contain it. And so far, judging by their reports on Saturday, saying that they've taken over the area, they may have fulfilled their end of the bargain. Had it gone further, perhaps we would have seen a greater sense of influence moving forward.
All right, thank you so much, FARAI. MUVUTI, we'll leave it there for now.